Yeah, so we're going to be diving into the entire Hyperion product line. So we've got our next-gen immersive home theater products. And really, this is going to be kind of our agenda for today. So we're going to kick into the high gear, I guess, with the APR 16. So this is our cornerstone of high-end home cinema experiences. So this is a preprocessor, extremely powerful unit. We'll get into the details of that after we cover the APR 16, which I will do a user interface tour and everything, so you kind of get a good a look and feel in terms of how the product drives and behaves and things like that. And then we'll dive into something a little bit different than a preprocessor. This is going to be a display-driven preprocessor. So we have our new line of Access series preprocessors. So there's the idea of an APR 16 being a big separate kind of processor with analog outputs and things like that, where the Access series really takes a completely different approach to building an entertainment space or a home theater with Dante and eARC inputs. So we'll dive into that, kind of talk about how that's different, look at some different signal flow diagrams. I'll give you another user interface tour, and then we will cover the new line of amplifiers. So we have our Hyperion power amplifiers now. These are based on pretty much the same architecture as the G4 amplifiers that we've had in the product line for quite some time. But now we've added Dante. So when you start talking about whole home audio distribution, or if you start talking about using the Access series for doing display-driven preprocessing, we can do the audio over IP distribution directly to those amplifiers without any analog connectivity or anything like that between the processor and the amplifier. So kind of an interesting concept, just doing more stuff over IP, over, RJ45 Ethernet, right? It is just kind of building an ecosystem around those kinds of technologies. So we'll dive into that. But first and foremost, we are going to talk about our preprocessor, the APR 16. So this is a true 16-channel preprocessor. All of the signals, whether it's XLR or RCA outputs, are completely matrixable. So you can get really creative in terms of your channel layouts, whether it's a 2-channel, a 9.1.6, or if you want to start having like a multiple subwoofer type system, the products gives you the ability to use all of those outputs to create really unique audio experiences, whether it's a home theater or just an entertainment space, what have you. And it is driven by some premium 32-bit DACs. So this is the ESS Sabre ES 9039. All of those outputs, the XLR outputs and RCA outputs, are driven by those DACs. So it delivers really superior performance. The studio grade HDMI connectivity and functionality, this really comes from the AV Pro Edge side of the AV Pro Global family, where AudioControl is obviously very specialized in processing audio, amplification, audio distribution throughout a whole home. AV Pro Edge has kind of come in and, with our strength in video distribution and with Meridio on the test and measurement side, we're bringing some really high-end HDMI functionality with advanced EDID management, HDCP management, even 48 gigabit per second bandwidth. So we'll dive into that a little bit and look at the details there. And then really the whole story is really just building something that adheres to a set of recommended practices. So CEDIA with RTA developed the RP 2022 recommended practices. And so this entire product line has really been designed to adhere to those best practices, to give integrators, all of the tools and functionalities they need to really build these, really high-end audio and home theater experiences. So here's a look at the back panel. So we've got the 7 HDMI 2.1 inputs, and these are all at 48 gigabits per second. So you can have like full-on 8K 60 inputs, up to 7 inputs on HDMI. We have the stereo analog balanced XLR inputs and 2 stereo analog unbalanced RCA inputs there on the top. We have digital coax inputs and 2 optical inputs there. Whether this is going to be a record player or a music streamer, what have you, you can have all of those available in addition to your video devices, whether that's a Kaleidoscape or a PS5 or Xbox or something like that, we can have audio devices on those inputs. And then we get into our matrixable outputs. So We have the 16 analog unbalanced RCA outputs. Those are all fully assignable. And like I said, I'll give you the user interface tour. So like the matrixing and customizability will make a lot more sense here in a little while. Then we have our 16 analog truly balanced XLR outputs. And mind you, these are all being driven by those Sabre DACs that I was referring to earlier. And then we have our HDMI output that also has eARC functionality. So eARC and ARC can then take the audio back from a display, whether that's a smart display. You've got your streaming services embedded on the display, and you still want to pull that audio out of that smart display. You'll be able to get that with that eARC return channel as well. Then we have our digital optical output as well. IR inputs for remotes. We have that ability to then extend that IRI with with an actual IR extension cable. We got our trigger inputs and trigger outputs. Whether you're triggering a projector screen coming down or triggering the amplifiers downstream, we have full control over that with these 2 ports. So this is a pretty unique feature with the APR 16. It actually has an integrated gigabit switch. So this handles device control, so accessing the user interface, accessing the API, but also doing your Dante audio distribution is all handled with the gigabit switch as well. So pretty powerful little integrated switch in terms of just IP connectivity. We also have the RS-232 port for serial control. So this, integrating with any control systems, whether it's AV Pro's house control system RTI, or that's a Crestron Home or QSys or what have you. You name it. We've got drivers for all of those different brands, and sometimes RS-232 control is used with those in addition to the web API. And then, of course, the all-important AC power input. It is a switchable power input, so 120 volt or 220 volt AC power. So what's in the box? So I just want to let you know what's actually included here. So obviously, you get your APR 16 processor. It is a 3RU rack mount. It does come with an IR remote control, obviously the power cord. One thing I do want to note that is that calibrated microphone. So the calibrated microphone is actually included with the unit. So whether you're going to do room calibration using Dirac or HAA or REW, any of those kinds of things, this is a calibrated microphone that can be used for all of those room correction type processes. So don't worry about having to source a microphone. We include one for you in the box. In addition to a 15-foot USB cable, so it's a USB-C that goes into the microphone itself, and then USB-A on the other end for connecting to your laptop or whatever you're using for configuration. And then it does come with rack ears and feet, so you can either have it on a shelf on the rubber feet if you want to do it that way, or you can mount it in an actual equipment rack, and so it does include the rack with screws to be able to mount really big heavy duty rack ears to mount in an equipment rack. So who's the target market? So really, I mean, this is the ultimate in separates technology, right? So this is a preprocessor that is really meant for professional integrators and custom installers. Just with the matrixable XLR outputs and RCA outputs, we can really get crazy in terms of channel counts, channel layouts. Like I said, the multi-sub type configurations, and homeowners investing in the reference grade cinema rooms. So these are $50,000 plus systems. When you've got the preprocessor, the amplifiers, the really high end speakers, whether it's a projector or a DV LED wall or some big screen TV or something like that, these are significant investments in the entertainment space. And so this is the equipment that will back up that kind of in-home theater experience. Professional calibrators, so just people that are really the experts in the field and really want the studio grade tools and precision that the APR 16 provides. And then doing multi-room system designs as well. So the unit can scale thanks to its matrixable outputs, whether it's the 16 RCA outputs or XLRs, but also being able to do whole home audio distribution via Dante. So getting that audio out of the preprocessor and into a whole home audio distribution. So you can take that home theater audio and maybe pipe it to the kitchen or the garage or something like that. Like if you've got the game on and you're kind of you're mobile, getting snacks or drinks or something like that, and you just want to have the whole home have that audio with it, and it could be music too, I suppose. gives you that flexibility with the Dante capabilities. So this is a little bit deeper dive into the individual, key differentiators of the APR 16. So we've got the studio grade 16 channel architecture. So this is both RCA unbalanced outputs and the truly balanced XLR outputs. So 32 total physical outputs. Every output is fully matrixable. Supports layouts from 2.0 all the way to 9.1.6. And you can get really creative, like I said, with the subwoofer outputs or repeating channels. Because it's matrixable, you can get super crazy, I guess, with your channel layouts and creative with what system you're going to build. 6-band PQ and low and high shelf per channel settings. Plus or minus 60 dB of independent bass, treble, gain, and trim per inputs. And then 2-channel and multi-channel sound modes per input. So whether an input has true stereo or Dolby Atmos or something like that, you can actually set it up per input how that audio is processed into the Hyperion APR 16. When I do the user interface tour, that'll make a little bit more sense. But let's, like, for instance, if you have like a Sonos or a record player or something like that, some kind of a music streaming type appliance, you want to be able to handle that in a different way. Maybe you want to fill the entire room evenly with music as opposed to just doing a 2-channel output. It has that ability to kind of custom process what we're doing with those kinds of sources. So the DAC performance. So, at the heart of the Hyperion, we've got the Sabre ES9039 Q2M DACs. So they're some of the most really advanced DACs available on the market today. So this is a 32-bit processor. So the result is just exceptional measured performance, dynamic range of 130 dB, total harmonic distortion is well under 1,000th of a percent, frequent response across the entire audible spectrum, just ruler flat, and staying within a 20th decibel from 20 hertz all the way to 20 kilohertz. And then on the output side, delivers 10 volts RMS over XLR and 4 volts RMS over RCA. So this just gives plenty of headroom for virtually any amplifier or signal chain. And it supports 24-bit 192 kilohertz sources, so it's fully capable of handling even the highest resolution audio available today, whether it's from music streamers or kaleidoscapes or lossless music streaming services. All of those kinds of things, we're able to process that natively on the unit. So video performance. So we got the 7 HDMI 2.1 inputs, that true 48 gigabits per second, and the HDMI output with that handy dandy eARC audio return channel. We do 4K 60 and 4K 120 hertz support. Obviously full HDR support, whether that's Dolby Vision or HDR10, you name it, we've got support for it. Variable refresh rate. So this is really important for modern gaming consoles, Xbox Series X, PS5, gaming PCs, all of that kind of stuff. That variable refresh rate functionality is an important part of getting the most out of those systems. Auto low latency mode, HDCP 2.3 on every single port, and that is also fully configurable. And then we do have what we call the Hyperion Intelligent EDID Synthesis, which is a mouthful. But that really, again, comes from that AV Pro Edge heritage, I suppose, where we're constantly having to, manipulate EDIDs to be able to communicate with a display properly, or communicate with downstream equipment, and how many channel counts do I support? What kind of HDR formats do I support? And we can manipulate that EDID to be able to work with any pieces of equipment within the system. Immersive audio formats, obviously full decode and rendering of Dolby Atmos and DTSX. And then we have seven different audio processing modes. So with native, this plays the audio, obviously in its native format without any processing. So what comes in, what goes out. A 2-channel stereo down mix, all channel stereo. So this is really great for building background music. So you can, take that 2-channel stereo and really upmix it to all available speakers in the arrangement. So it just fills a room with background music really evenly. So that's a really handy feature for entertainment spaces. Dolby Surround is a Dolby upmixer. So analyzes stereo or multi-channel content and distributes that across no matter what your speaker layout is. It'll be able to distribute that over all of the speakers, including height channels. Dolby mode just applies Dolby's processing for decoding and rendering of Dolby content. So this would be for Dolby Digital Plus, Dolby True HD, Dolby Atmos. So it just forces that optimal decoder behavior. And we have the DTSS Neural X. Just engages the Neural X mixer, just expands 5.1 and 7.1 content to fill all available speakers, because we can do a full 9.1.6 and other different kinds of audio channel maps on this unit that is able to distribute that audio over all of the speakers. And then the direct mode, this is actually more of like a diagnostics type setup. So this bypasses all the DSP processing and just sends the audio directly to the output. So there's no up mixing, there's no bass management, there's no EQ. It's just raw signal. So this is just really good for testing, making sure channels are actually working and functioning as you want them to. So it's just kind of more of a diagnostic mode, if you want to think about it that way. So industry certifications and standards. So we do adhere to the 21 recommended practices for immersive audio. And really what RP22 is really just a framework for designing, installing, and calibrating home immersive audio systems. In the Hyperion product line, especially with APR 16 and our other Axis processors, are just designed with RP22 performance criteria in mind. It just makes sure that integrators and installers have the tools available to them to just be able to build those really impressive systems. We are ISF certified. So in terms of video signal integrity on the APR 16, we are certified with the ISF. We don't do any kind of on-screen display processing or anything like that. If you're familiar with that, if you change your input or you do volume up, volume down on a preprocessor or a receiver or something like that, it'll do that on-screen display and actually tell you, what input am I on and all of that kind of stuff. Those on-screen displays can actually really mess up video quality in terms of color space, HDR formats, all of that kind of stuff. It breaks it and actually lowers the quality of the video signal. And so we have it completely untouched, just to make sure that you're preserving, that really high quality content, whether that's from a Kaleidoscape or a Blu-ray player, something that is, the highest bitrate content. You're getting, the most of that content when it's come through an APR 16. So it's really important. And FCC Class B compliant as well. So for control integration, we've got the 7-inch front panel LCD touchscreen, and it has a full web interface that I'll give you a tour on in just a second. RS-232 IR control, and we do have drivers for all major control systems. So RTI, Crestron, Control4, Savant, you name it. We've got drivers for them. The trigger inputs and outputs, so that's the physical triggers for triggering downstream equipment or projector screens, you name it. We've got the triggers to be able to handle that. Cloud-based firmware updates. You can also update the firmware via the user interface if you want to. So if it's not internet connected and you don't want it to be internet connected, it doesn't have to be. But if you do want to put an update, that is available to download, and then you can push that via the user interface as you see fit. And then we have the proprietary ARM-based DSP platform. So this is a much faster, lower latency DSP processor and more reliable than a lot of the PC-based competitors that we see in the market. All right, so I'm going to jump into the user interface. Bam. All right. So this is the home page, or the main screen of the APR 16. So we've got our power on and off, volume control. We have the ability to mute, actually manually type in the volume, adjust it via the slider. We can do the active input and audio processing mode. So here you can see we've got those 7 HDMI inputs, as well as our digital audio inputs, analog audio inputs, Dante inputs, and our eARC return channel that comes from the display. And so we can make any of those active as we see fit. And then if we want to manually set a audio processing mode, we can do that from the main screen as well. So we'll move into the system section here. See, and you can, as I bounce back and forth between main and system, so all of the active input type settings are then, and volume settings, are actually available here in the upper left-hand corner as well. So you always have access to that. And now for the system info, we actually have our incoming video format. We have our audio format that we're processing, sample rate, and bit depth. I think this is set to, I think I got a Kaleidoscape streaming Ready Player One or something like that. So you can see that it's the top quality stuff coming from that particular source. Model number, serial number information. So audio settings. So this allows us to default settings and also limit the maximum volume. So the on volume is when the APR 16 turns on, like what volume is it going to be at? So, maybe you were blasting music at a party or something like that at midnight, you went to sleep, then you want, watch, I don't know, the morning news or something the next morning. You don't want to be at party mode, right? You want to be at, morning news kind of level while you sip your coffee. Well, that's where that on volume is able to customize that so you don't, blow yourself away with a really previous high volume setting. And then the max volume, again, kind of takes that a step further. If you have kind of a comfortable max volume, like you don't really want it to get any louder than that, like you sit on the remote or something like that, and it's going up. You want to make sure you don't blow yourself away with that. So we're able to actually minimize, or I guess set a max volume value here as well. We do a VU meter on and off on the front panel. Display brightness. So there is that 7-inch touchscreen on the unit itself. We can adjust that display brightness, either by manually defining a value here, doing the plus and minus, or we can do the slider. Trigger on and off. So this would be the actual voltage that the trigger out is using. So it's plus 5 volt or plus 12 volt. So depending on what's downstream of the unit, you would need to customize your trigger outputs. And then it also has a screensaver setting on that front panel too. So you can actually do an image gallery. So whether or not you have, I don't know, family photos or some kind of themed, maybe you're throwing some kind of themed party for, I don't know, Christmas or Thanksgiving or, you name it, right? We can actually do kind of a themed image gallery on that screensaver to make, the APR 16 is essentially an art piece amongst the rest of the home, which is really cool. And we can disable and enable the screensaver, set timeouts, how long each individual slide or picture is on, display controls, so we can actually lock it out completely. When does it turn off? Display lock. And this is then where we can drag and drop images. So each image can be up to 50 megabits per second. We just have our AV Pro Global image on there right now is what we're displaying. So kind of a cool little feature for the front panel. Let me go back to the system section here. So system date and time, this stuff isn't too interesting, but you're able to configure your date and time, the time zone, and then whether or not it actually syncs with an NTP server. So whether you got something in your home or you want to put it to a web address, it's able to sync for, daylight savings time or, whatever, just make sure that it's accurate, and serves as a good, date and time reference if you're looking at the front panel. Firmware info, you can check for updates via cloud. This is also where you can update, upload files manually and be able to push updates to the unit. And this is an interesting set of settings and things like that for installers and integrators, I think. So if you have, let's say you have kind of a system that you really like to install. It's a really popular install, and you've done it once with an APR 16. It might be a good idea to actually save that configuration file off of the APR 16, and then next time you do an install, or maybe your end user completely goofs up the APR 16 settings somehow, you're able to then load this configuration file to the APR 16 and it just replicates every single setting in it. So that's a really nice way to speed installations along, or at least gives you kind of this like baseline configuration without having to start from scratch every single time. It's just a nice way to speed things along. And then this support snapshot. So if for whatever reason, you've got issues with your APR 16, something funny happens, the support snapshot actually does this cool virtual snapshot of not only the configuration, but every setting and even the state the system is in. And this allows our engineers back here at headquarters to be able to troubleshoot those things, because replicating issues is just as important in the process of troubleshooting and fixing. You got to be able to reproduce those issues. And so that just kind of speeds that along for us here back at the factory to be able to adjust things out in the field. Reboot controls, nothing too fascinating here, just being able to reboot individual system components. Hot plug detect controls. If a TV or a sync device, source device is giving you some trouble, you're able to do the hot plug detect there. And then there's some engineering settings in terms of enabling and disabling CEC control, DTS, dialogue control, DRC, and dialogue normalization. We can control all those things from the engineering settings. All right, so let's dive into input settings. All right, so this is pretty cool in terms of being able to really customize everything and being able to really investigate like what's going on with EDIDs and things like that. So I'll click on HDMI input 1. And here is the synthesis engine, so our EDID configuration. So here, my APR 16 here in the lab is actually connected to an LG TV. It is, in fact, a 72-inch TV. And it supports HDMI 2.1, FRL2. It's using DSC. We've got all the Dolby Vision and SDR format, or sorry, HDR and SDR formats supported here. These are the audio formats that it accepts, all of the resolutions. I mean, it gets kind of crazy how much information it's able to provide to you. And then if you want to override any of those things that are currently in the EDID, now you can do this with the synthesis engine options. So whether you want to restrict or manually define a max resolution, refresh rate, color depth, color space, override HDR information, disable or enable VRR for a variable refresh rate, you can do that. Audio configuration, audio formats, some advanced settings like getting rid of individual resolutions if you want to, restrict deep color support. It really just gives you lots and lots and lots and lots of information and control to be able to customize your home theater experience. So pretty powerful tool. Then we get into the audio settings. And so this is per input. So this is just even for this one HDMI input. So this goes for, the other 6 plus your digital and analog inputs as well. But we're able to dial in our bass, treble, gain, and trim settings here. So plus 60 and minus 60 dB worth of adjustment on all of those settings. Get into the advanced settings. So this is our 2-channel multi-channel mode. So how are we processing it? So this is what I was talking about before with, do we treat it as a 2-channel stereo? Do we do an all-channel upmix for filling a room full of music or something like that? Or do we, force a Dolby upmix or Dolby processing, wherever we want to do? We can do that for multi-channel inputs, 2-channel inputs. And again, this is for individual, like all of the different inputs, whether it's digital, analog, or HDMI, you can fully customize this per input. And then in lip sync delay, anything from 0 all the way to 1,000 milliseconds worth of delay. And then we've got some engineering controls, and this is really a lot around HDCP manipulation, whether or not you need to force it to 1.4 or go to 2.2. We have full control over that. You can make the input active from this link here. You can also give it a custom name. So maybe I want to call HDMI 1 my Xbox. I can click save, and then that actually gives it a friendly name so that way your end user actually has context to what is connected to HDMI 1 and 2, and even the digital inputs. You could say record player or Sonos or what have you. And so that way, when they look at that front panel, they actually see those friendly names there that you've given to each of those inputs. So it just makes the user experience a little bit clearer instead of just having to memorize what is on each individual input. You can customize that for them, and then you can clear the name if you want to, if things change or get upgraded or something like that in the future. So all of those settings that I just showed you are really shared across analog inputs. So in terms of doing your bass, treble, and trim settings, you can do that with all of the analog inputs. You can still do your custom name, how you're actually processing that audio, your lip sync delay, and same for the digital inputs as well. So all of those settings are shared across all of that. And for Dante, again, all of the same settings that we were looking at before. So then you get into output assignments. So this starts getting into the fully matrixable RCA outputs and XLR outputs. So we do have speaker arrangements that are predefined. So if it's if it's a drop-down one and you can click that will automatically populate all of the channels then on the XLR and RCA outputs. Like for instance, if I do a 9.1.6, yes, I would like to change my speaker arrangement. this then will fill out all of the different speaker channels on the XLRs and the RCA, so you don't have to sit there and like individually matrix them. You can if you want by actually clicking into them and then picking which speaker type you want. And so when we talked about having more than one subwoofer in a system, if you wanted to do that, you would just do your low frequency channel on more than one of the outputs. And then you have full control over frequency response, gain, the distance, so the distance from the speaker wire, we can change that from meters to feet as well, and get pretty detailed there. But you can do this for XLR and RCA outputs. So you have full control over all of that. And then we go to the grid. This is a little bit different view. So you can look at all the numbered individual outputs and still do channel assignments, crossover, levels, distances. We can turn test tones on and off as well. So that'll enable pink noise for doing any kind of, whether it's calibration or just verifying the speakers are connected and arranged and everything's kosher. You can use that test tone on and off for that as well. For Dirac, so we would actually turn that Dirac filtering on and off. And so that's the Dirac software would then interface with the Hyperion and do this all this configuration via the API. But if you're doing it through something else, a little bit more manual process, like you're using REW or something, and making those measurements a little bit more manually, I suppose, then you can get into this and start addressing distances, levels, and things like that. So yeah, fully customizable there. Then you get into our EQ configuration. So here we've got our 6 PQs, our low and high shelf, and this is per channel. And so here we have all of the channels, and the speaker will actually populate based on output assignment, I believe. So if I change this to, instead of a 9.1.6, let's just do a 5.1. So that should restrict it then, like how many actual channels are in the EQ section too. So it kind of cleans it up for you. Yeah, so you've got your 5.1 channels here. Oh, I just accidentally went to my PowerPoint, my bad. There we go. So here we can actually do a nice drag and drop of the PQ settings, or you can manually define the gain, Q, and frequency for each individual EQ. You can also copy EQs. So maybe your, front left and front right channel are the exact same, and you want to be able to just copy that over without, putting in all of these things manually. You can just do front left, copy EQ. Well, I want to copy that here, and then it'll just copy all of those settings to those channels. So just a super quick way to get it going and off and running. And then we can turn it on and off completely if we wanted to as well. So network settings. So this is just the device's IP settings, so we can configure it to DHCP, or if you want to do a static IP address. We will be adding some additional Dante settings here as well, in addition to VLAN settings for Dante versus the control network. And then the console, this is more for, I would say, audio control use, AV Pro use. So this just gets us into the API. We can do some debugging and things like that, but it gives us some control over what the DSP and the MCU is doing. So more of a tool for us, but it does give you an idea of how much stuff is going on when you see the messages and stuff going back and forth. All right, so that was the APR 16 UI. Let me get back to my PowerPoint here. All right, cool. It is Dirac Live ready. So we'll support 3 tiers. I should say Dirac Live. We'll support all 3 tiers. The licenses will be purchased separately. So these licenses are not included on the APR 16, just to be clear. Sometimes these things can be included on certain pieces of equipment. We decided not to do that with the APR 16. But it will support the room correction. So optimizing magnitude and phase response of all the speakers in the room, bass control, just to optimize the subs and speakers so that they're all working together. And then the full-on active room treatment, it really just transforms all of the speakers into a coordinated audio system with the Dirac software. And that is the microphone that is included with the APR 16. So like I said, you do not have to buy a separate microphone, or use your cell phone microphone or anything like that. To be able to do this configuration, we do include that in the box with the USB cable. So when you're doing these kinds of room correction and calibration type methods, we've got you covered. And just to go a little bit more about Dirac, so we have the room correction, so correcting frequency response, just volume levels and timing across all the speakers, aligns phases of the speakers to reduce distortion and smearing, phase alignment, and then we have the bass control as well. And then we get into the actual active room treatment, where this is where we're really dialing in that actual viewing space. So where the people or the end user is actually sitting in this home theater, we really dial in that sweet spot for them, so that the entire audio system is working together to give them the most optimal audio experience. Then we've got just a coverage of the licenses. So we do have the room correction license, the bass control license, and then the art licenses. There are bundle packages available through Dirac's website as well, so it saves a little bit. If you want all three, you don't have to buy them individually, so it saves you a little bit. And then we do have a partner program with them. So if you scan that QR code, whether it's now or offline, you would be able to then get access to up to 5 free showroom licenses to be able to do your room correction on APR 16 in your showrooms. This also allows you or enables you to be able to sell Dirac licenses through your own programs. So that's a pretty handy little sales tool as well. All right, so switching gears here, we're going to talk about the new Hyperion Access line. So this is our display-driven audio processing. So what is Hyperion Access? So these are audio endpoints purpose-built for taking eARC out of a television and converting those audio signals to either Dante or AES67. So we've got our little 2-channel eARC encoder, which is exactly that. It just does a 2-channel downmix of whatever is coming into it. And we have our 10-channel eARC processor. So you could do, a 712 system with this unit. Plus it also does an automatic stereo downmix. And then we have our 16-channel eARC processor, which enables you to do a 9.1.6, straight from the back of the TV via eARC over Dante to your Hyperion amplifiers, and then to your speakers. And so it's just a completely different way of designing home theater systems. So here's our little 2-channel, just as a quick overview. So this was actually previously the AudioControl ETV. We decided that it fit into the Access product line, and so we rebranded it. But it does convert 2 channels of PCM through eARC or digital inputs to AES Dante or AES67. Supports high bit rate audio, auto sensing inputs. So you can put digital inputs, whether it's coax or optical, and it will intelligently switch between those inputs, whether the TV is on through eARC or you've turned on a Sonos or a record player or something like that, and it automatically senses that new input. It will automatically switch to the newest one and then fail back if something powers off. So designed for, your bedrooms, outdoor displays, workout rooms, things like that. Pairs really well with our whole home audio amplifiers like the 4800D and 1600D. And here's a better snapshot of it. And there you can get easy access of the IP address for configuration and things like that. So the 10-channel one just steps up the processing. But really what this is if you're familiar with the Bijou line, where the Bijou is doing your eARC audio processing and then doing that local amplification all in one box, we're just taking the amplification out and just doing the audio processing and then putting it out as audio over IP. So now you're able to go to, some big dog amplifiers if you really want to build out the home cinema, or you can go directly to one of our Dante-enabled whole home audio distribution amplifiers and then do your audio distribution from there. So pretty powerful. So the 10 channel, so this is the 8+2. So no need for an APR 16 if you're just doing a 10 channel system. You'd be able to do this over Dante. So process 8 channels of Dolby or DTS through eARC. And it does the discrete channels, and it does do a dedicated 2-channel stereo down mix. So you compare that with the rest of your home audio distribution. But it does pair with the new Hyperion power amplifiers because they have that local Dante input as well, and it does CEC volume control of the display. And then the Axis 16 just is, the 10 with even more channels, same processing ability, same inputs, same input switching, you name it. All of that's the same, but we can get into that 9.1.6 and 9.1.4 speaker configurations with and without down mixing. So it just takes us that next level. That does say coming soon, launching in Q2. I do know for a fact that we will have an MPI going out next month. So that's really kind of on the heels of the release. And so I wanted to talk about it today. But that'll be a new product for us that you'll see next month. You'll see definitely some noise from the marketing team, probably myself with additional trainings and things like that. We will be talking about that over the course of the next month. All right, another web demo. All right, so one thing I do want to point out here, and I think this is a really key strength of the AudioControl Hyperion brand is, so this is the APR 16 web interface, right? Now, if I click into the Axis 16, I mean, it's like the exact same layout. So if you're familiar with the product line and the product family, it's really nice to be able to have like a recognizable user interface and just general configuration workflow. Obviously, the Axis 16 doesn't have near as much configuration as the Hyperion, as the APR 16, but still. Definitely gives you the same layout. So we've got the main menu here with power on and off, speaker volumes. If we have that stereo down mix volume, so if you want to go out to headphones or something like that, we can have independent volume control versus what's actually going out on the Dante signals. In the system section, we can do speaker volume settings. So again, that on speaker volume versus the max speaker volume. I talked about that with the APR 16, where you want to have a volume level that's comfortable, right, when the unit actually powers on. And then we have a max speaker volume where you can really cap it so you're not, blowing yourself away with too much volume. And then the down mix volume settings. So we can either actually have this follow the main speaker volume if we want to, or we can do independent control. So that's where, if you had a headphone setup or something like that you wanted at a completely different volume, which typically you would have a different volume than your main audio outputs, you can do that easily through here. Dolby enabled. So we've got this really just turns on. It handles. How do I want to say this? It handles Dolby up-firing speakers differently. So if you're using in-ceiling or on-wall height speakers, you don't need to worry about this, but you have up-firing speakers, just helps balance the channels a little bit better. System info, so this is where you would update your firmware. You can save settings, export settings, load things. So this, again, is to help kind of speed configuration of the unit. If you've got kind of a de facto way you like to deploy these things in the field, you're able to then customize that. So at least you're, starting from your baseline, and then you can make little tweaks based on that, particular household or user preferences. Input settings. So this just gets into your audio processing. So we'd already talked about this with the APR 16, but you got your 2-channel stereo, all channel up mixing, Dolby up mixing, and then also Dolby processing. And we can handle that via whether it's a 2-channel input or a multi-channel input. Gain, DRC, CDS limit, and CEC audio system control. We've got that via the eARC input config, and then your digital input configs will have their own individual settings as well. Speaker configuration. This is just what channel is going on what output. So the way Dante advertises itself and AES67 advertises itself, our outputs, 1 through 16 or whatever, you're able to then customize the actual channel layouts and then what channels are on those individual outputs. We can adjust frequency response, levels and distances of speakers depending on your channel layout. So all of this is then configurable in the Axis 16. And then we get into EQ settings. And while not as pretty as the APR 16, it'll get the job done. Being able to adjust your EQs for your front center channels, subwoofers, surround channels, your uppers, all of that great stuff. But it's the same concept of the 6 PQs, bass settings, and treble in this configuration menu. And then network settings. This is just getting into, your host name. If you don't want to use IP addresses, you can give it kind of a nice little friendly Axis 16-bedroom or something like that. The MAC address, DHCP settings, and these are your Dante settings to be able to configure it for your Dante audio network. So This is the Axis 16 that I'm showing you, but the Axis 10 and Axis 2 share this exact same type of user interface. So like I said, if you're familiar with one, you're familiar with all of them. And this even gets into the Bijou series as well. If you're familiar with the Bijous, that is also an EARC processor / amplifier, a part of our single room experience setup. The user interface there is really, really similar to that as well. So if you know one, you know them all. All right, cool. Oh, and so this is our MXNet Dante C-Box. So this actually acts as your Dante controller. So we've integrated a Dante controller into our C-Box to be able to do the 16-channel Dante channel input and output configuration. And this is also has its own API too, so this can be controlled independently. Yeah, so just a powerful. In addition to all of the products that we have, we've got the MXNet stuff doing the Dante and AES67 control as well. Okay, so I talked about the processors. So let's get into the amplifiers. So we've got a brand new Hyperion series amplifiers. So these are Class H amplifiers. We have the 7-channel Hepta, 5-channel Penta, and 4-channel Tetra. You do not have to remember those names. Sometimes I have a hard time doing it. But the 7, 4, and 5, right? That makes sense. Those are numbers. And so that's what we've got for building these super high-end home theater systems. And so who are we selling to? Well, really, we're selling to the same people that are building those really high-end home theater systems, whether it's got an APR 16, when we're doing our analog distribution via RCA or XLR, or are we using Dante or AES67 audio distribution, right? So is this on an IP network? Well, now we've got Dante inputs on these amplifiers as well. And so you can get really crazy in terms of whole home audio distribution and amplification. You can get pretty creative with Dante-enabled equipment. Yes, so talking about Dante and AES67. So we can receive the high-resolution 24-bit audio directly over Dante. So we don't have to have any converters, no DAs, or anything like that between the processor and the amplifier. You can go straight from a processor, whether that's an APR 16 or an Access processor, straight to the amplifier. So single Ethernet cable replaces all of those analog interconnects. So it really just cleans up wiring, reduces potential noise issues. Like if you're going, I don't know, past like an HVAC unit in a wall or something like that, or ducting or power or something like that. Those EMI interference can actually mess around with analog connections. Where if you're going straight digital over Ethernet, you're immune to that, so you don't have to worry about it. And it is based on, I did touch on this a little bit, but it's the core amplifier topology is shared with the G4 platform. So this is, the non-Dante amplifiers that we had with the G4s. That architecture carries over to the new Hyperion amplifiers, which is now added Dante as well. So Class H efficiency. So just full power with significantly less heat compared to Class AB designs. Got BIMOS outputs combined just for the speed of processing, just a superior bass control and high frequency detail from a single output stage. Again, the cool running performance, so you don't have excessive ventilation in the rack. You don't have to have really super active ventilation that causes a bunch of noise or anything like that. The Class H runs nice and cool. And scalable channel configurations. So the 4, 5, and 7 channels, you can really mix and match this to be able to build really complicated home theater systems or amplify, entertainment spaces and things like that. And they do share the same front panel. So, whether it's all of the amplifiers in an APR 16, right? You've got them all racked up. They look super consistent. You've got that nice touch panel on the APR 16. You've got, that nice glass front. Hardware rack, it just looks really nice. You've got the customers that really like to show that off, show their friends what they've got because they got this nice, clean, sexy looking home theater setup. This definitely plays into that by being a nice, consistent look. We do have the light drive anti-clipping protection. So this is a carryover from a lot of the other audio control products. But with digital clipping, you can absolutely destroy a set of high dollar speakers if you run into some clipping. And so this prevents not only the clipping, but you're really just protecting your investment. Like, right, you spent the money on the APR 16, you spent the money on the amplifiers, and now you've got these speakers that can cost more than any of that combined. And we want to make sure that we're protecting our customers' investments, make sure we're not running into issues there. Yeah, professional grade connectivity. So we got the heavy duty 5-way binding posts on the analog connectors, balanced XLR inputs, unbalanced RCA inputs, 12-volt triggers, so that can actually come from the APR 16 for power on or off. Just a really high-end built unit. All right, so just looking at some wiring diagrams. So this would be an APR 16 and a full 9.1.6 with our RS1000 subwoofer amp there. So being able to come into those HDMI sources, whether it's a Kaleidoscape, Apple TV, Xbox, record player, whatever, we can take any of those kinds of audio sources and then be able to output those to our Hyperion amplifiers and then distribute that for the whole home theater. So this takes it a little bit step further. So you can see that the home theater layout is essentially the same, but now we've taken the Dante audio channels from that 4.4-port gigabit switch into our home network, and then going to one of our Dante network amplifiers. And now we have the signal coming from the APR 16, then going into the kitchen. So this is really good if you're doing, in an entertainment space, or you're throwing a party or something like that, and you've got the tunes on and you want it to be, the same throughout the whole house. You can do that really easily with this type of configuration. Or if you've got the game on, you're watching March Madness or Super Bowl or Formula One race, whatever it is, right? And you want to step away for some snacks or, I don't know, another beverage or something like that, you won't lose, you kind of still hear what's going on as you, traverse from your home theater space into the kitchen and then back to the living room or home theater, wherever. You're able to share that across all of that with this kind of distribution. All right, and this switches gears a little bit. So now we're doing our display-driven processors. So here we've got our PoE-powered eARC processor that then is sending Dante over the home network into a Director 4800D and doing your 2-channel speaker amplification. And then this amplifies that, right? You get into the Axis 10, so now we've just got more channels. So we're taking that eARC from the display into our Axis 10, going Dante audio streams into our network, and then going into our individual amplifiers. And whether those amplifiers are then multi-zone matrix amplifiers that are going to a kitchen or a garage or a patio space, or we could go into our actual our new Hyperion line, and then we're then fueling that home theater or entertainment space with your home cinema experience with the Hyperion amps. So just a really flexible way to do audio distribution directly out of the display. And then, of course, the Axis 16 just kicks it up a notch, really. Same concept. It's just all the channels. So now I can actually do a full 9.1.6 home theater over Dante with my whole home audio distribution. So just a really powerful little box to be able to enable those kinds of things. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. Just barely under an hour there, so maybe have some room for questions, unless our boys Sam and Tom have been answering them in the QA. I hope so. It's always good to get live feedback on questions and stuff like that. But that'll do it for today. I appreciate it.